Hi, I'm just setting up my computer there. Natalie Blank here, going live today for SOULL, Seers of Universal Life Lessons Love. Now, today I'm going to be talking about the soul journey. Now, the soul journey is an interesting, a really lovely journey that we take after life. So it's a journey with 9 steps. I will go into each of them more in the video, but the first one is, of course, life, the thing we know. We see this, we're part of it. Then death is another part of it. An afterlife get-together. I'll give more explanation of what that's about. Healing, transition, becoming one with Source, soul part coalescing, soul contract, and rebirth. So those are the 9 steps of life. Sorry, I'm just putting that up, putting the document up so I don't have the video being distracting. Okay, so we all know what life is about. We are here, we are experiencing it. I'm going to talk more next week about why we live and why we're sent here, but basically it's about the lessons that we have to share because of our lives. And like I said, we'll get into that more next week. The next step is death, and death is the beginning of the transition from the separateness that is life. So life is, we are separate from everyone around us, and death is the first step to becoming more connected. Now, it is a fairly quick stage, but it is an important one. Without it, we couldn't go on to the next steps. The next thing after that is the afterlife get-together. So when we pass away, the first thing that happens is that we are greeted, and we are greeted by those who have gone before us. So those who have passed away, those who have those who are the parts of our soul that have from previous lives, so past us, all of those people that we have loved and who have loved us, and also animals. Now, I saw the beginning of this with my own grandmother a couple of years ago, that she was very sick and was dying. And this is often the case with older people because their process is slow, and so there's an opportunity for the afterlife stuff to be coming in, and this has been seen by many people in end-of-life care, that they start seeing people who have already passed. So my grandmother described, and she was in a room with a beautiful view of trees and a garden. It was just beautiful. Big glass windows, and she would lay there and explain to us how she could see an escalator in front of her, and that there were all these people getting on an escalator, and she could see her husband, who had passed many years before, and other people who had been important influences in her life who had already passed. And it gave me chills to see this and to hear her talk about it. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, when they're passing, people who are with them think they've lost their marbles. They don't take the time to actually ask the questions of the person to find out more of what it is they're seeing. So that's an interesting transition that happens if you're having a long-term slow death. And I'm not necessarily saying painful, but when it's a slow death, my grandmother had dementia, so she wasn't so afraid to mention these things that she was seeing. So after the afterlife get together, which lasts a little while, not a long while, usually within the week that process has occurred, and oftentimes by the time that somebody is being buried, if that's, or their body is being dealt with, whether it's buried or cremation, that is actually finishing up. Sometimes they will come to the funeral. I was at a funeral a little while ago, and I just thought I will connect in with what was going on, and if I could feel anything. And I felt the energy of the woman who had passed enter the room, and I kind of got the feeling that she was leaving the party, for the want of a better way of putting it, and coming into the room and actually going to the people, the family, and giving them some comfort, or attempting to give them some comfort, and kind of wanting to know who was there for her and for her family. And then after that experience, then there is the going into the healing, which I spoke about a couple of weeks ago, which is the reliving of your life from the point of view of all those people you have had an effect on. So each of these steps is a step away from the separateness of life to the wholeness of source. So the healing is where we are reliving that journey of our life, and we're getting to see how our life affected others, how we made them feel, if we had a positive effect on them or a negative effect. And it's people, it's animals, in some cases probably even plants, and we get to relive that and see what effect we've had. Now, the next step is transitioning from that whole soul into soul parts. So we are all made up of, our souls are all made up of parts of universal source, or some people like to call this force God. So God, universal source, we are all made up of parts of that. And so we go through life as a collection of soul parts. We go through death as a collection of soul parts. We go through the afterlife get together as a collection of soul parts, and we go through healing as a collection of soul parts. And then we transition from that into actually releasing that need to be one separate entity. And we separate. And only once our soul parts have separated from each other can we step into source. So then we become part of source again. We become part of universal source, that is the wisdom and the knowledge of all the generations of life, both human and animal and plant, connected, all as one. And our wisdom from our life, and you might think you don't have much, but you do, our wisdom from our life and our wisdom from our reliving become part of that whole conglomeration of soul parts that is universal source. So we become part of universal source, and that is a really lovely part of our journey. Our soul parts all separate and go off to become a part of it all separately, but they're all part of one. So while they're separate, they're still one. It can be a bit difficult to really connect with what that fully means. But just have faith that this is what's happening. Then that's not just the end of it. Our soul parts, well, not our soul parts, a group of soul parts that may or may not contain some of our past soul parts, coalesce. And they coalesce and they come together, and they know they're going to be taking a journey together. And that journey is becoming a soul. And that soul, they coalesce based on what that soul's life journey is potentially going to be and the lessons that they're going to learn. So that coalesces and comes together and becomes a soul. So that coalescing is another step. And then the next step, which is the 8th step, is creating a soul contract. Now, a soul contract isn't like fated activities. It's not that you don't have the right to choose, and you do in your life. You can go on a completely different tangent in life because you have the ability to make those choices. You have free will. But a soul contract is about what lessons you will learn. How you learn them is something quite different. And for those people who have continual patterns in their lives where, you know, they go, this always happens to me. I don't understand why this is part of my journey, and it keeps happening and it keeps happening, and they can see a really clear pattern, or even somebody else can see a really clear pattern in their life. That is them not learning that lesson. When you learn the lesson, then you can move on from that. So it's about the soul contract is about connecting with and the new soul deciding what the journey is going to be to some degree. It's also when it's decided where and how and all of that, how you're going to be born, who you're going to be born to. And some of that comes from what the lessons will be that you'll learn from that family. Now, the last step is rebirth. Now, that sounds really easy. Like, yes, you conceive a baby, the soul enters the baby is born, and that's it, that's rebirth. Not quite so, it's not quite so simple. So when a baby is conceived, the soul doesn't enter it straight away. There's like a marker for that soul to go into that body, but it's not actually going in there yet. The body of the baby can have some level of physical effect on it, but it's not actually part of the soul's not actually connected completely. That doesn't happen until birth. Now, why? Sorry, I'm getting a bit disconnected because I know this is a controversial topic. It's a topic that some people will find very difficult because they want to believe that a baby is, as soon as a baby is conceived, that's it, the soul's attached. Source has shared with me that this is not the case, that this is something that we have decided, that it doesn't actually happen until just before or during birth. So the lessons that come if you, for instance, have a stillbirth, are lessons for you, but they're also lessons for that soul. Now that soul could decide, that little soul that has done a soul contract could decide to move on to another family, or it could also decide that it's going to stick around and keep a holding place with you, and the next time you get pregnant, that's the soul that will go in. It all depends. It all depends. There's lots of different things that can have an effect on that. And I'll probably talk about this more at some point in the future. So I had a couple of questions this, here, I've got this. So just let me fix this so I can see that you guys can see it. So this is basically the cycle. We've got life, death, afterlife get together, healing, transition, oneness with source, coalescing, soul contract, rebirth, and then back to life. Now, rebirth and life are separate, and they're separate for a reason. They're separate because sometimes a soul isn't fully in the body of the baby, but also, I mean, it is, but I'm not explaining that very well. So it is in the body, but it's still as part of oneness, and it's still in the soul contract, and it's still kind of really aware of that whole journey that went on before it was born. And you can see this in some babies, that they're kind of a bit shocked to be here. And I've even heard stories, people saying that they've woken up at some point in their life and gone, wow, I'm here. And that's a part of the rebirth. So the rebirth isn't just the birthing. It's a journey that can actually take you into life. And then suddenly you are aware that you are living, and your soul goes, woo, I'm here. So rebirth's a very interesting one. Now, I also asked for questions earlier in the week, and the first question that I had was about organ donation. So the question that I got was, what about organ donation? Do you lose part of yourself when you do it? Do you make it harder for your soul to rebirth if you do it? And then there are stories of recipients going through changes, making them more like the donor after transplant. What's with that? So with organ donation is a fantastic thing. Please do it if it calls to you as a thing to do. It's not something you have to do, but it is a fantastic thing that will help someone or many people. You don't lose part of your soul because you've lost part of your body. And this goes both for organ donation and surgeries where some part of you is removed for your health. Like you might have your gallbladder removed, or your thyroid removed, or your appendix removed. This is not going to affect your soul journey. It is not going to take away part of your soul, so you can't transition. And as we can see here, with the becoming part of oneness and then coalescing, the soul parts that come together are not going to be necessarily, and probably pretty rarely, the same parts that come together. So you're not going to come back as you. Your soul parts will come back in different combinations with other soul parts that are out there. And you can't affect that journey by losing organs. That would be terrible for amputees if that was the case. And then we would end up having to question about cutting our hair and all of those things. So no, you're not going to lose part of your soul by donating your organs. So the question of Sorry, having a drink. Recipients going through changes that make them more like the donor after transplant. So I've heard many stories, I'm sure we all have, of people who have an organ transplant and then suddenly like classical music when they only liked hard rock before, or and then they discover that their donor loved classical music, or they couldn't stand a particular food, but as soon as they've had the transplant, they suddenly like that food, or a combination of a whole lot of things like that. And I would love to hear from anybody who has ever had one of those experiences. It would be amazing. My understanding of what's actually happening there is not that a soul part has been left behind, because it can't be. Our souls are made up of soul parts. Our ability to think outside the concrete is quite limited. But if you think about, so somebody will say, oh, Archangel Michael came to me, I could feel there was Archangel Michael with me when I went through this difficult situation, and that helped me get through. So you hear these stories from multiple people, and they could all have been at the same moment, because there are billions of us on the planet. Now, is Archangel Michael, for instance, one energy that can be in one place at one time? And I use this as something that people understand and can accept, that an angel can be in more than one place at a time. And I will cover angels at some other point. We can easily accept that. Well, our soul parts can as well, because, and our souls can, because they're, you know, there's a level of concreteness to us when we are in the physical body, but when we are outside of the physical body, when we have passed away, when our soul parts are free to roam, we can be anywhere, and we can be in several places at once. So we can be in healing, and part of our soul parts can be elsewhere, and that's okay. So I hope that answers that question. Like I said, I'd love to meet somebody who's had that experience. It would be fantastic, or even to talk to you, or get a message. Okay, Dominique asked, from the point of death to reincarnation, what happens in between? Well, I hope I've answered that question. And how long in general does it take to come back? Well, as we've discovered, we don't come back as us. We don't come back as the same collection of soul parts. There are infinite amounts of soul parts that can come back together, and they all have different roles in our lives when they're part of us. The likelihood that we would come back as one whole us is pretty slim. There might be soul parts that need to have a lesson that didn't get learnt in that life, that may choose to come back together in the coalescing, because that will we can learn from that soul part can learn again from a life that is similar, or will have a similar journey. However, it won't be the whole soul. It might be a percentage of that soul. And then ghosts. That's just residual energy from a life spirit, isn't it? So this is an interesting question. So ghosts. Ghosts are, yes, they are residual energy, but that doesn't mean that energy, that soul, hasn't moved on. It is a part of the journey that some souls can come back. Now, I have had people I have worked with during the transition from life to death, and after they've been through the healing journey, and this is a limit that I could say I have, but I suppose I may have put it on myself, that I tend not to try to communicate with people while they'll still be in the healing journey. So one person I worked with in particular, he was in the healing journey for a year. So how long? It could be a year. It could be millennia. It depends how long the healing journey takes. And then once the healing journey has happened, it depends how long the soul parts, the individual soul parts, want to stay in oneness before they coalesce again. So ghosts are part of that energy. They're part of the soul parts. And it's like the Archangel Michael topic. You can't limit spirit by our concrete world. I have 10 fingers in this world, but when I am back into spirit, I am not limited by this body. And I could have 20 hands that I can act with. So I could come to many people when I pass. There's no limit based on our human understanding of what is life and what is death and the concreteness of what we see. So I hope that answered your question, Dominique. In terms of time, as I said, there's no real time limit. There's many options for how long things take. Now, in terms of this journey happening this way smoothly, there is something about people who have led extreme lives or lives of extreme violence. Now, I would like to say that people who have led those lives, they are separate. They become separate. And I feel that to some degree they do, because their healing journey becomes so long. So say someone like Hitler, who impacted so many lives in such a negative way, and those negative effects are echoing through time as the survivors have had to deal with their trauma, and the children of the survivors are dealing with echoes of that trauma, and the grandchildren are also to some degree dealing with the echoes of that trauma. He will still be in healing because lives are still being affected by his life journey. So there is a separateness that happens. I would like to say they don't go back, but I don't believe that's true. I believe our journey is, this is set in stone, and it's for everybody. It doesn't make sense to me to think that I can only have a reliving, I can only have an experience of heaven if I pray a certain way. I personally don't believe that that is true. I believe we all have the same journey, because it would not be logical for us to have separate journeys based on our belief system, based on our religion, that if I go to this church and I pray this way, that therefore I will get to go to a good place, but anybody else gets to go to hell. Because quite frankly, some religions or some sects that say these things are only 30, 40 years old. So you're telling me there wasn't a heaven before that? Anyway, I've digressed. I will talk about that again in another talk. If you're interested in hearing more about that, please comment below. So be sure to subscribe so you can watch next Saturday as well. I will be moving these videos into my group. There is a group. You can find the link to the group in the description of the video. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments. I will come back and look at them. And make sure you join that group so you can find the videos. It's also a place for you to start discussions, ask questions, and I might not be the only one with answers. So please feel free, join the group, become a part of it. The videos will also be posted to my website, www.natalieblank.com.au/soul. I think that link is also in the description. So I hope you have found something interesting in this video. I hope it helps put your mind at ease about what is going to happen to you after you are no longer here. And I just want to finish by saying, be the seer in your own life. Thank you for watching. Bye.